All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, you wanted to talk about the Biden issue with prostate cancer and stuff, and I'm not sure the angle we're going, but I'll riff off you. We'll talk. I'll talk some medical stuff. Got a few sources for just progression and everything, but I think personally, my opinion going into the conversation is it's kind of a red herring. So, so I'll
Well,
get into
that's
that part of it as well. Uh,
that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So originally we were going to do something different, something more philosophical, because that's more our thing than current events. But then several points kind of went click in my brain, and I thought, am I just crazy, or is this announcement about Biden and his very advanced and aggressive prostate cancer, is this a much bigger deal than I originally thought as well? Or am I the meme of, I think it's from It's Always Sunny, where he's at the board with the,
mhm.
yarn connecting everything and he's looking crazy, and great meme for many occasions. Um, am I that guy, or is there a there? And that's why I wanted to go kind of down a rabbit hole uh,
I think it's a
on this.
deflection personally. Because if we can connect something that could have been under the radar, such as prostate cancer, which realistically, you've got an 80-year-old head of the most powerful nation in the world, is
Hmm.
not getting blood work every year. I mean, my PSAs were high last month, and I get blood work done every month because I'm just in this program because, hey, health is what I do for a living, and I might as well experiment with these programs to give advice to my clients and stuff. But it was a one-time up. So what we do is we monitor that in the next blood work. If it's down again, then it probably I didn't masturbate enough that month or something. You know, that's how fickle the prostate is, right? But if it's consistently up,
Hmm.
then you probably should get it checked out because there's stage one and two, which is specific to that location. But then when it gets to three, it starts to get into your lymph nodes and all of that. And then you can end up with things like blood cancer and stuff. And the fact that we would not have somebody checking for that with the most powerful man in the world. And this is why I think it's a red herring. There would have nobody would have blinked an eye if they said, oh, he has prostate cancer and we're treating him for it. It would have been, oh, well, that's something we can all identify with. Nobody would have said, oh, his dementia is ruining the world. We would have said, oh, get your treatment, dude. Kamala step in as VP, and everybody would have been fine. This is why I think it's a nothing burger because that would have been the perfect excuse to put Kamala in place. The dementia was not. The dementia was something they tried to ignore. And
Hmm.
so that's why I think it's a red herring. I think they're trying to make an excuse for their own not reporting on the real problem.
Well, and to that point, something we were talking about over the weekend while I was down there catching bug bites and sunburn, because that's what we do when we go fishing.
Hmm.
Um, it is the Jake Tapper apology tour, and I point him out specifically because Tapper is probably CNN's highest profile anchor, right? And he styles himself as an old-fashioned Walter Cronkite style neutral party.
Hmm.
I'm not, I'm not an opinion guy. I'm not an opinion show. I'm an anchor. I'm a journalist. I'm just the facts, ma'am. And it's BS. And you don't have to scroll very far down X to find montage after montage that people are posting of Tapper himself, not
Hmm.
just CNN, but Tapper himself calling uh, people like Laura Trump uh, conspiracy theorists for questioning Biden's mental faculties during the election.
Hmm.
And now here we are just what are we now, 200 days into the next administration, and now he's running around promoting a book that he co-authored. And books are not written overnight,
Yeah.
and they are
Yeah,
not
that was my point
published
when we were
overnight.
talking. Yeah,
That
is
means that this book was in the process of being researched and written and then
yeah, this isn't a
published.
Substack article. This is
Exactly.
actually a published book.
There's no way that this stuff you are claiming in the book, there's no way you didn't know it at the very least towards the end of the election cycle, if not far into the beginning. And
Yeah,
you're
and
on TV calling people conspiracy theorists.
weren't we just listening to Jocko on Peterson, and he was
Hmm.
talking about how he made a decision to self-publish one of his books because the publisher said a year was too fast.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they don't know that's too fast. And even self-publishing it, he barely got it in time.
Hmm.
So everything that Tapper says you have to rewind at least minimum a year,
Hmm.
minimum, but probably with the way books go, 2 to 3 years.
And this is where this particular issue fits into our broader focus on philosophy, because what I had wanted to talk about today was dive more into, since I read clips of it on previous episodes, I thought, you know what, it's been a long while since I've fully read Starship Troopers. I want to reread it. And I had forgotten just the depth he goes into philosophically in trying to establish, as he says it, Heinlein says it, an objective scientific morality.
Mhm.
So the thought was, before we dive into something deep and specific like Dostoevsky, let's see if we can talk generally about a moral framework. Well, why is that so important, and why does that matter here? Because I don't remember who we were listening to, but I think it was someone on Tim Pool talking about how the media now, because they were talking about Diddy and trial by media. And it's
Mm.
not just the
No, that
literal.
was Valuetainment. That was
Oh yeah,
Bet
yeah.
David.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was Bet David. So they were making the point that in a lot of ways what happens in the actual trial doesn't matter,
Hmm.
because we have trial by media. And in that case, literally, because you're talking about a literal trial process, but in any uh you know, debate, discussion, disagreement, you're going to have a trial by a metaphorical trial by media. And this is a problem when no one trusts the media.
Mm.
You might trust your media, you might trust your preferred sources, and sometimes you might have good reason for that. Like I trust people who make apologies. I trust people who don't come out, like Tapper, who don't come out when you're trying to sell a book and say, "Oops, I got it wrong, you people were right." But when it doesn't do them any good, when there's no direct, tangible benefit to coming out and say, I was wrong on this one, you
Hmm.
guys were right, okay? And when you lead with your mistakes rather than burying them, like some the legacy publications like New York Times and Washington Post, yeah, they'll print a retraction and it'll be somewhere buried in the back of the paper.
Well,
But a lot
what
of
I hate is when they say kind of the slight acknowledgement of their wrong, but then start going into
mm,
how many times that would have been right.
mhm,
And that's the worst one because then it just deflects everything and they never
yeah.
really admitted they're wrong.
Exactly. And what does that say about the people following that source? One of the reasons nobody likes us is because we will point out the nonsense of Trump derangement syndrome, especially with
Hmm.
someone who was one of the great academics and moral thinkers of our generation, Sam
Sam
Harris,
Harris. Yeah.
and now he's gone off the deep end. But then we will also point out the other side of the Trump worship syndrome of he can do no wrong. Everything is 17D chess. And oh, guys, come on. No, it's not always right. It's not always one extreme or the other. But you have a lot of people who are, I mean, I can't think of a better word to say than religiously following their side. their side both in the politics and the punditry. And
Hmm.
the example, so the example Steve Deace used a couple of weeks ago when Tapper was on his book tour is Dace grew up in a unfortunately similar household to you, and he said, "This is extreme gaslighting. This is when my stepdad Dave would beat the crap out of me and mom, and then come back, the next day or later that night and sit us down and say he was sorry. He was sorry
See,
that you made me do
I was
that."
about to say we never got the sorry.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, no, but
Yeah.
that's the twist on the warped mind of
Hmm.
the abuser is that I'm really sorry y'all made me do that.
Yeah, and it's the externalization that they say what's the biggest red flag as soon as someone externalizes in the first conversation you have with them. Oh, that person made me mad. Did that person make you mad or did you get mad?
Hmm.
That's the question. Because sometimes it could be that that person did something that made you angry. But if you got angry, where is your responsibility in that? And some people can't separate those things.
Yes.
And we see
And,
many, 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 many a relationship breakup over that.
or unfortunately not break. I mean, we have a
Mhm.
condition, battered spouse syndrome is a thing.
Stockholm
Yeah,
syndrome. Yeah.
it is a kind of Stockholm syndrome, and that was that's why Dace made that analogy, not just because it was so personal to him. So this kind of naked gaslighting, but the other point he was making is you're seeing blatant naked gaslighting directly in front of your face, and you're not saying, "Yeah, I don't know if I can trust this guy and this network anymore."
Hmm.
You're just nodding along with it. You're the battered spouse.
Hmm.
He just bruised you and said, "I'm sorry you made me lose my temper, honey. Make sure you tell everyone you fell down the stairs." And you're nodding along saying, "Yes, of course, dear, I fell down the stairs."
Hmm.
And that actually, I'm gonna.
Well, let me while you're pulling something up, let me Adam Sosnick was the guy talking on Valuetainment. I wanted to give him credit because I feel bad for the guy sometimes because he's kind of the heel of that
Mhm,
show because he's the more liberal. Me and him probably think very much alike in a lot of ways, which is not good for being on a conservative podcast panel. So he gets a lot of shit from the commenters and the rest of the panel, and he gets ganged up on. But I think everybody fell to that point, and they were like, "Yeah, that was probably one of the most brilliant things you've ever said." And so I like him, giving him credit. Adam Sosnick, he's got his own channel as well, so look him
mhm.
up.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna share things a little out of order because,
Did I make sure you could?
yeah,
Hold
I
on.
can.
Okay.
So this is from The Atlantic, legacy corporate media, and it's behind a paywall, but it's fine because you get the point just with the headline and a little bit of the first couple of paragraphs here. So this is The Atlantic's take on the coverage of Biden's cancer announcement. And the headline is, "Biden's age wasn't a cover up, it was observable fact." Subheadline, "The story about the former president getting old
Oh.
is getting old," by Mark Libovitz. Okay,
Oh.
and so this was published yesterday, May 20th. We're recording here on the 21st. "Washington is a buzz these days," The Atlantic has learned. "I love it when Washington is a buzz. Let's jump right in. Why the buzzing? Because apparently Joe Biden is still really old. Older than he was last summer when Washington was even more abuzz about the 46th president being really old and about whether he was fit to lead the country, run for re-election, beat Donald Trump, thwart fascism, etc. Or 3 years ago, when overwhelming majorities of Americans were already saying in polls that Biden should definitely not seek re-election. Or 2 years ago, when he declared that he would, in fact, seek re-election while Democrats anguished, off the record, you did not hear this from me, that if Biden went ahead with the campaign, it would surely end in disaster. Or 6 months ago, when it did, in fact, end in disaster, etc., and so on and so forth. You get the point. So
Oh.
the the gaslighting will continue until morale improves, apparently. Uh, is the new saying that no, there's no there. And again, cue the montage of all the times you were called a conspiracy theorist. Cue
Hmm.
the headlines of Jen Psaki saying Biden is so sharp, the staff has trouble keeping up with him. Really, Jen, who's now on, I believe, is she on MSNBC or CNN? MSNBC. Yeah. So now
Yeah,
she's
MSNBC. Yeah.
pontificating on MSNBC when she was part of the cover up.
Hmm. Well, and I think it's psychologically worse than that because there's this feeling and need for people to try to explain away things. Because you brought up my past, so I'll go ahead and go into it. In the 80s, and yeah, the late 80s, when I was probably 8 or so, when the abuse was happening as the child, and I'm just going to speak for myself, you would end up getting a state counselor and going to that. And I remember her; she was a nice lady. Uh, but the theme of the whole experience was, what's wrong with you that's triggering him? That's the first time I got IQ tested. I did all kinds of personality tests and everything. Why are you triggering him? Was the idea, the theme of the whole thing. And so you'd sit there and talk to your counselor, and she would do tests on you. And e- 40 years later, 30 something years later, it's like you were analyzing the wrong person. What's wrong with me to trigger that person? Well, that person was just a bad person. They were just a bad person and they needed to be fixed, not me. But it took a long time to figure that out because I was a kid. And that's the way we're being treated right now. What as a country is wrong with you that we keep ending up in these situations?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you so dumb that you elected the dementia guy? Why are you so dumb that you elected what we're calling the fascist guy? Why are you so dumb, public? It's like, no, we're doing the best we can. You keep giving us these bad choices, and that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Um, talk about the before I go into some more of my rabbit trail here. Talk a bit about the technical side of this diagnosis, um, because I've heard a lot of people pointing out that prostate cancer is one of the, if not the most easily detectable cancer that we have.
Yeah, let me get the technical term here. Because all you need is a little blood work.
Mhm.
Eh,
And
Okay,
as you
so
get older, you're
PSA
more
levels.
routinely getting blood work anyway.
Yeah, this is something that should be part of your physical after you're like 45. You just get a little blood work done. PSA levels, and I wanted the specific name for it. Prostate specific antigen is uh the acronym there. And if those are over a certain amount, and what you would need to do is, it's not just the number, you need to get a baseline. And so that's why they start earlier.
Mhm.
So that way they can kind of get ahead of it. And if your PSA levels elevate, it could be something acute. Like I said, just you get kicked in the balls or something. You that could be acute if there's a little bit of damage there. It's kind of like creatine levels in the blood, where it's not supposed to be leaked into the bloodstream unless there's damage. So for those, so going to the exercise physiology realm, this is actually part of the research I proposed in my graduate work. You measure the blood for creatine kinase, and if there is a high level of creatine kinase in the blood, there's a lot of muscle damage. So if you do a protocol that is supposed to cause muscle damage, you can measure the blood to see how much muscle damage you did, because it should not exist outside of the cell itself. And if it's outside of the cell, that means you damaged the membrane and it was able to leak out. Same thing with PSA, is it's not supposed to really be able to come out of the prostate itself. And if it is there, or the antigen is there, which is what they're measuring, then that means there's damage to the tissue, which is usually caused by a tumor. That's why you measure it over time. You get a baseline for that person. And then if it elevates, you measure more. And if it stays elevated, then you do like a biopsy or something to make sure. It is the easiest one to detect of all the cancers, other than maybe a lung tumor that you can just see with an X-ray, right? Uh, uh, and you want to catch it, but it also, I'm trying to think how to go through this. Okay, so no medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I am. Please see your doctor if you are concerned about this. But going forward, once that you see those elevated levels, then you monitor it and you make sure it's not spreading because it has 4 stages basically. It's a small little just developing group of cells is stage one. Then you have a tumor that is only in the prostate, it's stage two. And then it starts to go out to the rest of the body, which is stage 3 and 4. And when it starts to go out to the rest of the body, that's when you're in big trouble.
And the announcement was that it had moved into his bones. That is
Okay, so yeah,
way advanced.
that is way advanced. That is stage. Hold on. Where did I have the stages? Here we go. 1 to 4.
And pretty much any cancer, if it's stage 4, it's
Mm-hmm.
uh, get your affairs in order and say your goodbyes.
Yeah, I think that's right on. That's when it's become stage 4. Yeah, spread to distant parts of the body, such as lymph nodes, bones, and other organs, is stage 4. So yeah, if it spread to his bones, then yeah, he's in
And
in the final days.
the reason this is important and the point a lot of actual medical experts are making when they're talking about this, like I heard Dr. Drew was making the rounds, and he had made some comments to this effect that the fact that they made the announcement that it is in stage 4 is significant is because this is a slow developing cancer,
Very slow. Yeah.
meaning you can extrapolate backwards and be pretty darn certain that he had this during the 2020 campaign.
W- the with prostate cancer, you can extrapolate he's had it for 20 years. It's that slow developing. That's why it's so important to get those PSA levels in your 40s,
Hmm.
not just in your 60s and 80s, right? Because you can get way ahead of this thing. And,
Yeah.
it's not the worst thing in the world to have an extraction.
Yeah. Why that matters is because, um, well, let me share this next bit. So
Okay.
again, kind of going backwards from my original
Well,
thought, but here we
the
are.
question is with it is the cover up.
Yep.
The cover up from no the cover up from the media we're going into, but the real question is, was he covering it?
Hmm.
Because some people just live in denial.
A lot of people since this announcement have been making references to the movie Dave, where the um Klein and Sigourney
Hmm.
Weaver were the stars, and the president basically has a stroke and is incapacitated, and they find this look-alike named Dave to pretend to be the president,
So kind of like Woodrow Wilson.
kind of like what Woodrow Wilson did and that
Hmm.
was basically kind of not, yeah, that was the inspiration because Sigourney Weaver, the first lady, that was what happened with Woodrow Wilson. The first lady was basically the president
Hmm.
because she was controlling access to him. Um, and so that has been the analogy is what did Jill Biden know and when did she know it and what was she doing about it? And so here you have something that righty media was pointing out very early on in Biden's presidency. So the headline here, and this is a right-leaning uh, website, and I did on purpose because I wanted again to make the point of Tapper's gaslighting that you call these people conspiracy theorists for pointing out. The headline here: early lids, lighter duty, Biden schedule marked by fewer events, more getaways than predecessors. Biden has taken dozens of personal trips and spent all or part of at least 117 days of his presidency at Camp David, his home in Wilmington, Delaware, or his beach house in Raboth Beach, Delaware. This is a story from December of 2021. He hasn't even been inaugurated. December 3rd, 2021. He hasn't even been in office a full year yet. And people were already taking note that now, so political nerd thing here, calling a lid is an old-fashioned term that they use that when they tell the media, we're done for the day, the schedule's done, y'all can file your reports, you can go home because we're not doing any more official business today. And they would call early lids a lot. And Biden would spend a lot of time outside of the White House, a lot of time in Delaware. Well, now looking back, it would seem like he was probably spending a lot of time taking an early lid and going to Delaware to get cancer treatments.
Mm,
So who was actually in charge when all of this
yeah.
was going on?
Well, and what people don't know is how much chemo wipes you out. You're you have a chemo treatment, you're done for a while.
Well,
It's
and that's the other concern is not only physically but mentally.
mm,
I brought up Dr. Drew, and he was making the point that one of the side effects for the kind of cancer treatment that he might and probably would have been receiving would be things that look a lot like dementia.
mhm.
That would be things
Yeah,
like,
because he has high PSA levels and
mhm,
he history of prostate cancer. Yeah.
that,
He's
and
openly
it,
talked about, so I can say it, you know.
yeah.
It's-
Uh, so the and also the physical side of pointing out, Biden's tripping, and it might not just have been he's over 80 years old, but also he was receiving these treatments.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would love to be a fly on the wall of the room where they figured out chemo because some doctor sometime in history said, "Hey, you know that whole nuclear thing? If we nuke somebody,
Hmm.
if we nuke them, the cancer will die before they do. So let's nuke them till the cancer dies and hope they survive." That's basically what chemo is.
Hmm. Yeah. So you're essentially I I happen to be sitting next to uh someone who was doing their residency. This is a long time ago. I was on a trip and I just happened to strike up a conversation with the guy sitting next to me, and he was doing his residency for anesthesia. And he said, I think I've shared this story before. He said, "Yeah, I went into anesthesia because people talk about how you don't do that much work and you make a ton of money as a specialist. And then I got into my first class for it, and the professor scared the crap out of us because anesthesia is the science of poisoning someone without killing them."
Mm-hmm.
And he
Yeah,
said, "Oh gosh."
I 100% well 99.9% think that some of my health problems to this day where they keep coming bubbling up just body falling apart, which is why I wore my getting older is your body falling apart shirt. Uh because the history of heart disease and everything. I've been under general anesthesia probably more than 5 people combined. And it's not putting you to sleep. It's bringing you so close to death, your body doesn't respond to what they're doing. And we don't know what the cumulative effect of
Mhm.
that is. And
It's why
so,
you don't dream in under anesthesia.
yeah,
You are
yeah,
just
yeah,
out.
you're just out. And I think I've actually developed the tolerance for it. I've had it so many times because the last time I had to go under was for the rectal thing that I had to have done, the fistula. I don't remember this because anesthesia, but they said we had to use the maximum amount on you because you would not go down. You weren't mentally there, but you were talking to us and you would not go down. And finally I did, and I came back out of it, and they're like, "Yeah, you're gonna be feeling like shit for a while because we had to nuke you basically."
Hmm.
And I think I've developed a tolerance for it, but that's not a good thing. because it's like developing a tolerance for alcohol. Eventually, you get cirrhosis of the liver, right? And anesthesia is not the cool thing we think it is, although it can be a very useful tool.
Yeah.
You know, if you need a leg amputated, you want anesthesia. I'm sorry, but we do it for so many general things now.
A- And the point of this is you have the person who is in charge of the most powerful arsenal no in human history. The US military, just the nuclear part of it is take all of the destructive power of every army ever and combine it, and it's not even close to what we can do. And the guy in charge of that is receiving routine treatments that are poisoning him and inhibiting him physically and mentally.
Hmm.
And it was probably going on for a long time. So again, who knew what and when did they know it? And I'm going to bring up an oldie but a goodie here that we have referenced a number of times. Time magazine, after calling us all conspiracy theory crazies, election deniers, and then turns around February 4th of 2021,
Hmm.
less than a month after January 6th, where they said it was an insurrection based on lies, the secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. Okay. And I want to scroll down here to what I think is kind of the crux of this, where they flat out say, quote, there was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protests and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. End quote. Okay, hold on a second. You're all conspiracy theorists for denying the results of the 2020 election, but you just use the word conspiracy and you point out that this informal alliance wasn't bipartisan. It was left-wing activists, your own words. And so the right pointing out what happened is a conspiracy theory.
Well, I think that they're skirting a line there with the left-wing
Yes.
activists and the business titans because people still, even though it's not true, associate the business titans with the right because
Mm-hmm.
capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is
Mm-hmm.
not
Sure.
true capitalism. It's crony capitalism, which has become left.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, but it's at the bottom of that paragraph. It's okay because it is quote oppose Trump's assault on democracy. End quote. Yeah, right. The handshake between business and labor was just one component of a vast cross-partisan, insert opinion again here. You just said left-wing activists. Anyway, back to the article. Cross-partisan campaign to protect the election, an extraordinary shadow effort dedicated not to winning the vote, but to ensuring it would be free and fair, credible, and uncorrupted. For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives scrambled to shore up America's institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from a remorseless pandemic and an critically inclined president. Though much of this activity took place on the left, it was separate from the Biden campaign and crossed ideological lines with crucial contributions from nonpartisan and conservative actors. I will insert there as the guy on the right. No, it wasn't. It wasn't nonpartisan. They may have been conservative actors, but they were definitely partisan because all of those people on the right were people that had been vigorously opposing Trump since the 2015
Yeah, it's things
primary.
like the Lincoln Project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, the
They were
scenario
the
the
Mitch McConnells of the world.
yes, exactly. Um, the scenario the shadow campaigners were desperate to stop was not a Trump victory. It was an election so calamitous that no result could be discerned at all, a failure of the central act of democratic self-government that has been a hallmark of America since its founding. And
And
here's
we
where
had
it
the
gets into the
most
nitty-gritty.
muddy election we've ever had based on their
Exactly.
actions. But,
Their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws. I will insert editorial here. No, they didn't. They did not change laws. They changed executive orders and judicial decrees. That was the whole point that Rudy Giuliani was making, that was getting lost in the noise and the grift around the 2020 election. Was Rudy Giuliani's entire legal argument was none of this was done legally, because the Constitution empowers the state legislatures to establish their own framework for federal elections. But all of this was done either through executive governor, executive orders, or state Supreme Court judicial findings, which directly, clearly, black and white, letter of the law violates the Constitution. That was his whole point about the fortification, is that it wasn't done legally. They said, but here's where it gets really, to me, insidious. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line against disinformation and use data-driven strategies to fight viral smears. They executed national public awareness campaigns that helped Americans understand how the vote count would unfold over days or weeks.
I have to edit this article. They did not target disinformation, they targeted malinformation. Disinformation is purposefully using lies to spread uh, information that is incorrect. Malinformation is telling the truth that the government doesn't like.
Yep.
Yeah.
By their own definitions.
By their own definition. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's their
Homeland
definition.
Security. I don't know if they changed it since the new administration, but that was on the Homeland Security website. Was this is what malinformation is. And I am guilty of malinformation
Mm-hmm.
personally.
So the reason I point this out is because I don't remember I wish I could remember who I heard say this, but they made the point that we now know, with everyone finally admitting what was plain in your face, to that Atlantic article of everybody knew Joe Biden was old. This is an old story and not a story at all. Well, yeah, except you're finally admitting it. Is So for those who think the 2020 election was thievery, not only were people who voted for Trump allegedly potentially had their vote robbed of them, but this is why this prostate cancer announcement is so insidious. It also means everyone who voted for Biden had their vote stolen,
Mm-hmm.
because the person you voted for was not the person in charge. That's why this is a big effing deal. Because no matter who you voted for in the 2020 election, that wasn't who won. That wasn't who was running the country. So now all of these supposed, haha, was that a gaffe, or was that Biden just being, being self-deprecatingly humorous when he says, "Oh, they won't let me talk to you. Oh, I can't take more questions because they won't let me." Well, now that takes on a whole new tone.
Yeah, I got to be careful with my words here because I have to be morally, I guess, specific with how I'm talking about this. I hate that he has this cancer.
Mhm.
I hate that this is how it's going down. I wish justice would have been done because he was a corrupt individual for his entire political career. Uh, but this is not justice. This is just nature happening. And
Mhm.
I hate that people are celebrating it now because they feel like they're getting justice. But it's not true. Justice would happen if we said, oh, we had a trial and he was found guilty and he is paying the punishment for it. There was no trial. There was no guilt. I don't care if you believe in a higher power on this.
Mhm.
There is pity for a man who is going through something that we should all pity a man for going through. And if you're a human being, you should be saying, gosh, I hate this for you. But also he needs to face justice. And he never will because of this news.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Well,
you're bringing an angle of where we were robbed of this and he was a puppet and all this, but he was always a crooked
yeah,
politician. And I would rather him be perfectly healthy but face justice than the scenario we're in now.
And you're bringing me to my big point here, because where I'm getting at is justice or lack thereof. And to your point, more specifically about Biden, the other reason it's not justice is because obviously this was not a this was not a solo crime. It couldn't have been.
Mm-mm.
And so with people going,
But no
oh no,
doubt the
poor old guy has
machinations he put
cancer.
in place when he
Yeah,
was with it played into it.
exactly. So and somebody played. I heard a clip from David Axelrod, who was an advisor to Obama. He's a long time behind the scenes political guy in the Democratic Party, and he said flat out, "Yeah, this will change the uh, reflections and examinations, the post hoc examination of the Biden administration, or at least." I'm paraphrasing here, but basically what said, at least tamp it down for a year,
Hmm.
because you'll get at least a year of sympathy and people pulling back, and then down the road, probably after Biden has passed, they will look more deeply into his administration. Well, by that point, the cover up has already been covered.
Hmm.
It's already been buried, and it's okay. Is anyone going to face justice for this? One last point before I get to the main point on the justice for this is um this is a bit of a tidbit here that popped into mind when I was remembering an oldie but our old friend the Time magazine article on the election fortification. That was a shadow cabal, but definitely, if you are on the right and pointed out you're a conspiracy theorist nut,
Just like
is
lab leak and
just
stuff
like
like
lab
this.
leak and
Yeah.
everything else. All that was a redux on a bigger on a bigger stage to what they did in the primary.
Hmm. Well, they did it twice. It's not just Biden. They
Exactly.
did it with Hillary too.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So, but here's why this is more important, because the Hillary versus Bernie primary in 2015, 2016, that was pretty much straight up rigged by the
Hold on.
Democrat
Someone's
Party.
sorry for the hiccup. Someone was knocking and ringing my doorbell, and it was a salesperson. And the only acceptable answer when I say I'm working is hand me your card. If you hand me your card, I may call you back if I want your service. If you try to sell me when I said I'm working, you have automatically lost. So they
Well, plus
automatically
the
lost.
inability to read the no soliciting sign that's right there by your
I
front
have
door.
even better. It's not no soliciting, it's no trespassing. So it's technically illegal for them to be on your threshold. It's the best way to keep Jehovah's Witness off, by the way, because they follow the law no matter what. And if you have a no trespassing sign, they will not be on your doorstep. They'll just leave their card and go.
All right. Where was I? Ah, yes. So,
Yes.
it's pretty cut and dry that yoinking the nomination away from Bernie to give it to Hillary was Democratic Party machinery. What makes the 2020 primary a little more insidious and also more applicable to what we're talking about here is, and this is from the Jacobin, which is a radical left. I mean, for crying out loud, they take their name from the guy who created the terror in the French Revolution.
I
That's
wouldn't
how
call
left
them
they are.
as radical left as even some of mainstream US media now because
That's
they
true.
still publish people like Matt Taibbi.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, but so that is one of the reasons I took this as my source here. But also I like their analysis that they did, that as the headline says, the corporate media convinced millions that Bernie was, quote, unelectable. There is overwhelming evidence a surge of mostly older Trump-fearing voters decided the Democratic primary, and that Bernie Sanders failed to counter an established messaging campaign that Trump would beat him in a general election. And they go through at the top of the article here that um, polling wise, Sanders was far ahead of the field when it came to issues and messaging. That the Democratic Party primary voters in that cycle far preferred his stances, even where they didn't prefer him, and that even uh, personally, when you break down some of the different demographics, um, they preferred Sanders personally as well. Well, okay, so what happened? Um, as they say, it's all about Trump and fear of Trump and creating a fear that Bernie couldn't win. And as you go down, the third section of the article is titled "The 3 Days That Decided the Race." Unlike Republicans, Democratic voters have a high degree of trust in legacy media, CNN especially, and get much of their news from television, particularly so for voters over 50. And they have links to all of this. So even if I don't like them philosophically, I appreciate that they source their stuff. Anyway, this is, incidentally, the same demographic that most consumes cable news, votes in disproportionately high numbers in primary elections, and increased its share of the vote this year's primaries. This year being the 2020 primaries. Sanders' greatest obstacle was arguably convincing his cohort of voters to abandon their long held skepticism about the left in electoral politics and to defy the relentless media messaging that reinforced it. And for a brief moment, he did. After winning the vote in Iowa and New Hampshire, and after Biden failed to crack third in either, which is a big effing deal
Mm-hmm.
historically.
Hey, Vivek cracked third in his, even with Trump in
Mm-hmm.
the mix.
Yep. Back to the article. Perceptions of Biden's electability collapsed, and for the first time in the race, Sanders led the field in both electability and voting intention. But rather than momentum, these developments prompted a barrage of attacks and apocalyptic warnings from Democrat officials and pundits about Sanders' threat to Democrats' chances in November. A group of party centrists spent millions blanketing South Carolina with ads making these charges. Party leaders and rival candidates openly vowed to deprive him of the nomination if he won the most votes. When Sanders defended Fidel Castro's literacy program on 60 Minutes, it was seized upon by anti Sanders officials in Florida for a round of withering attacks and warnings of how they would play in the state. A statistical analysis by In These Times found CNN covered Sanders 3 times as negatively after his blowout Nevada win as they did Biden after his romp through South Carolina, assailing Sanders' electability above all. Many factors led to Biden's triumph in the Palmetto State, from its conservatism and Biden's close association with the nation's first black president, to, most importantly, Representative Jim Clyburn's endorsement that Sanders crucially never tried to head off. But it's difficult to argue this media narrative didn't play a role in the old white tidal wave that swept Biden to victory. Data show that while the non-white vote in South Carolina rose 10% since 2016, the white vote more than doubled. And while the number of voters aged 18 to 44 rose by 42,028, turnout among those 45 and older skyrocketed by nearly 3 times that, 123,130, with most of the gains concentrated among those 65 and older. As he would in every state that followed, Biden dominated among this group and among voters who prioritized beating Trump. Again, the point being that there was a collusion between Democrat Party operatives, pundits, and media figures to go all in on a blitz against Sanders and for Biden. And it just so happened to coincide with the country shutting down over an unknown virus with an unspecified origin so that this 80-year-old could run his campaign from his basement, doing all of his interviews via Zoom and Skype. And at the time, people around him would have known he's not well.
Yeah, well, there's so many layers to this. It's unreal because Sanders represents something that is very, very left of center, but it's also on the compass. It's west and south. It's not west and north. And for those that are familiar with the compass, north is authoritarianism and south is populism. And so he is a populist leftist, where Trump is a populist rightist. And actually, Trump is a populist centrist, but he represents, I think he's misguided in his views on it, but he represents the people. Uh, that might be shaded with business interests to these days, but at least he represents it, right?
His
And
rhetoric is heavily anti-establishment.
exactly, yeah. And they couldn't have that. Pelosi, Biden, Harris, for that matter, couldn't have that, but also Mitch McConnell, Johnson, all of these people couldn't have that either. And they're the ones that control the messaging when it comes to that media. Even Fox News, everybody says, oh, it's a right wing thing. No, it's what you're allowed to think on the right. It's not what is actually right wing. It is what you're allowed to think on the right. CNN is what you're allowed to think on the left. MSNBC is what you're allowed to think on the left because it keeps the people in charge in charge. And Bernie represented something that was outside of that. He represented Occupy Wall Street, right? Whereas Trump more represents Tea Party. And they're actually kind of more in common than the people on the top of that compass. The horseshoe theory, where the two authoritarians come together. Communism and fascism are just mirror images of each other at the top, where we got this big swell at the bottom that is the actual people. And yeah, Bernie got screwed so many times, and it was that messaging, like you talked about. And then we get it later with the Time Magazine cabal, that messaging. And then we got it later with the cover up, which is the what started this conversation, the messaging to cover it all up. And no, the authoritarian top was in charge. Who that is, maybe we'll find out in the next few years. We at least have a guy in power that wants to expose it.
Well, you have just led me into the point where I start pinning up the pieces of yarn and connecting things, and you tell me if I'm crazy here. So one of the
Like I said, I'll have to do a meme with
yeah.
the conspiracy theory guy. You know,
So one of the things I have been pointing out this year in our social episodes is guys, my tribe on the right, can we calm down, please?
guys in the
Because there's
California sense, which includes
yeah,
girls. Yeah.
yeah. So there has been a lot of all or nothing, you're my hero, and then suddenly you're dead to me if I don't get exactly what I want when I
Mm-hmm.
want. And it's, dude, a lot, a lot got done thanks to executive orders and the Senate pushing through at least the big nominees. There's a kind of
Mm-hmm.
hidden story about all the lesser nominees that are still hung up, which is part of the problem with the executive administration, that there are close to 100 people who require Senate confirmation that have still yet to be confirmed. But I digress. The point being, it occurred to me in thinking about, and what this is really the main reason I wanted to talk about the Biden cancer thing is something that happened, I think right before that announcement or right after, was Bongino and Patel coming out and saying they have personally reviewed the investigation and concluded that Epstein did in fact kill himself.
Hmm. I didn't see that.
Yeah, that was either right before or right after. That is a big effing deal to the anti-establishment people who supported Trump. And I use that term instead of right because this crosses the aisle of the lefty populists and the righty populists who supported Trump. The Epstein didn't kill himself meme crowd were a big part of that.
Hmm.
And so where this train of thought got circular and all over the place and started connecting some dots is I don't think they can, or maybe they don't think they can, to your word earlier, give us justice on some of these issues because you would literally destroy the country.
Hmm.
That the conspiracy is so vast, it just can't be done. It's like the people pointing out, guys, we literally cannot have a formal judge hearing for every single illegal before deporting them
Hmm.
because here are the numbers of how long that would take. And there are only X number of federal judges in the first place. And even if all of them were only doing deportation cases, which they can't do because there's other federal crimes that have to be adjudicated, it would take Y amount of centuries.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, same thing here. There is just when it comes to Biden and his health and who knew what when, set aside, okay, the what I think is the immediate next question, which is okay, then who was actually issuing orders? Who was running that auto pen?
Hmm.
Who was drafting executive orders? Who was drafting up pardon orders?
Which
That's the
is
next
which
question.
which is where pardons and amnesty can come in
Mm-hmm,
because you could come out as an administration and be like, okay, so here's the cutoff point. X and above in rank,
mm-hmm,
you're responsible. X and below, if you testify, you're free to go. And you can set that point to whatever is feasible time wise.
mm-hmm,
So if you're, level 5 executive and above, you're not immune. But if you're level 4 and below, which is going to be tens of thousands more than the levels 5 and above, you're immune and we would love your testimony. And you could put out the golden bridge that they call it in conversation. You put the golden bridge out for tens of thousands of people more than would actually be punished. And that's how they took care of the mafia with the racketeering cases, because they basically said if you're this level or below, you're a petty criminal, you were influenced, and you can get out of it now. And we'll take care of anybody who will hurt you for it. And that I think that's an opportunity there. And hopefully Cash and Bongino are thinking that way. Uh, because I think a lot of people should have amnesty because their
mm-hmm.
hand was forced. They were the petty people. They were probably just going in and saying, I don't see anything wrong with this because they didn't see the big picture. And that I think that's an opportunity there. And to your point, it would make it efficient enough that it can be done.
Yeah. And so, as an illustration of what I mean by how both broad and deep any kind of conspiracy here
Beauty.
must go, is um, this is a great illustration of something that we talked about over the weekend, and I've mentioned here on our episodes before, is that what Doge was uncovering. I got annoyed with the you know big time small government types who were shouting about you're not doing anything with Doge because you're not addressing entitlements, and that's 2/3 of the budget. That's true, but we will never address Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which is about 2/3 of the federal budget. We will never address that if we can't even agree that spending federal tax dollars to teach African men how to properly wash their genitals, that was actually a thing that from a while ago, not a Doge
Or
thing,
gender
but
studies in Pakistan. Yeah,
yeah,
that's working
exactly.
out really well.
If we can't agree that that is wasteful nonsense, we will never get to the big stuff. And one of the reasons we can't agree, or even where the voters can agree, we can't move on these issues, and for all the talk about making the funding savings that Doge is uncovering, and through executive action, they are able to cut off the funding of these things. There was a lot of talk of we need to make these cuts permanent through the budgetary process. That's not happening. A big reason it's not happening is because of how incestuous these things are. And if you're not following her, there is um, a software engineer who is a data systems analyst is her background, and she is data Republican, small r in her name to make sure you know I'm not part of the Republican Party. They're part of the problem. And this is just kind of a snapshot of the work that she has been doing and why it's been so important, but also so difficult. Because this is announcing a new tool that she created that is an AI powered um, search engine, essentially, that she created. And this is just one small part of a small part of the problem. And this is the amount of work it required to uncover this. I just shipped a crawler indexer that rips apart the National Endowment for Democracy's flagship Journal of Democracy archive, then stitches every author, NGO, and article summary into one laser focused query interface. This is more than search. This is x raying a decades old influence machine at machine scale. Here's what it does: links the whole web, instant context summary, prefix hunter mode, role detector, NGO crosscheck. That's the biggie there. That's why she needs AI tools to make this happen, because you have to cross check all of these things to see how all of this money is being moved around in ways that, like congressional insider trading, it may be technically legal, but it's unethical as hell.
Hmm.
And that is what she has been uncovering as she digs into what Doge was released, the information they were releasing. Is she was using these data analysis tools, AI powered, and they needed to be AI powered because there was so much data to sift through to figure out, okay, well, this grant went to this organization, but then this organization split this money up amongst these organizations, and then and it's the telephone game. It is maybe legalized money laundering.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, through this analysis and through following this money through all of these points of contact, and it circled back around and ended up in the campaign coffers of someone who voted for this. And that is what is being uncovered. And this specific thing here, again, it is one part of this NGO slush fund. Okay. And the point there is why, you know, the party apparatuses are losing their mind both publicly and behind closed doors, and why nothing is actually happening to do anything legislative substantial and permanent about this because there are just too many people implicated in all this.
Yeah, there's only two people that are fighting hard to get it done. And out of all our representatives and senators, you need more than two. And that's Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. And they're fighting hard and they're
Hmm.
publicly trying to expose everything, but they're the minority voice. They can't pass a bill on their own. And but they're doing good work in exposing what is actually being passed, and it's not good.
Yeah. Well, I liked your point about hopefully and these guys. Here's where I get mildly optimistic, which is not my normal state,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mildly optimistic is good because it's not that we're going to get everything, but we're at least getting some things. And some things is better than none things.
so Dan Bongino in particular to me is something of an inspirational figure
Mm-hmm.
in that um he ran for Congress for a House seat in Maryland and lost, and he only had, as he said, he only had maybe 10 grand left in the bank after the failed campaign. And that was when he decided to get into podcasting. He basically spent his last 10 grand making a home studio and starting up podcasting, which led to a show on Fox News, which led to investments in Rumble, and which has led to really over about a 10-year span, him going from, wow, we may have to declare bankruptcy here, to becoming quite wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was called, not even to be FBI director, but to be the number two at FBI, he said yes. And I think that's a big effing deal because of what he left behind.
Yeah, millions. I mean, tens of millions a year.
He turned
Yeah.
over his show to his staff. There's no guarantee that show is still there when you come back, whether it's a couple of years or whether you serve the full 4 years through Trump's term or whatever. And coming out and saying, yeah, actually, after looking at the reports, I believe Epstein did kill himself, is not the kind of thing your audience wants to hear.
Mm-mm.
And so if you are willing
I
to come out against your own interests, I still have faith in you.
I'd say there's a but there though,
Hmm.
because yeah, say he did kill himself. He was in a maximum security facility that is designed to keep you from killing yourself and on suicide watch. So there's a big but there.
That is exactly what when he was interviewed on the Day Show a week ago or 10 days, whenever it was that this came out, Dace got Steve Friend, the FBI whistleblower, on, and that was Friend's exact point. Right. But now I want to see the visitor logs, and I also
Mhm.
want to see the video to make sure that the video matches up with the visitor logs, because I want to know, okay, was he aided in this? Was he induced
Well,
in
I was
this?
going to
So
say
there are all these other
induced.
questions.
So put yourself in human shoes, right? So if I'm someone who has influence and could cause this to happen, and I approached you and I said, uh, you could do it this way, which is, it's not painless, but it's quick and efficient, or you could be flayed alive at some point, or all your children, or your family, or any of these other, like the mafia used to do.
Hmm.
You do this thing for me, or your whole family will suffer, kind
Hmm.
of kind of thing. That he still did it himself, but it was better than the alternative. And that's what we need to know. Okay, so we can throw out the Epstein didn't kill himself stuff. He did kill himself, but he was induced to do so, or maybe even drugged, right? We don't know his blood panel or anything like that. He could have been drugged and influenced in certain ways. So we still don't know the underpinning motivations of it if he did do it. And that's still out there. And that's not me just trying to be conspiracy theorist and hopeful. It's the fact that this was just way too convenient And yeah, people off themselves all the time for all kinds of reasons, and usually there is a reason. We need to know the reason. He wasn't just depressed because he would have done that when he was free if it was just depression.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, but it certainly doesn't look good after the freaking Pam Bondi Epstein file binder release faux pas that was a disaster. Um, but Patel and Bongino strike me as more serious individuals
Mm-hmm.
than Bondi does. Bondi strikes me as a ladder climber. Like she was, I believe, Florida AG. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she at least knows her stuff as far as being an attorney general goes, but she also strikes me as the kind of person who is going to use this as a stepping stone to run for governor or senator of Florida. And she's not necessarily one of us. And I don't mean that on on just the she's not a conservative. I mean, no, one of the anti-establishment true believers, whether you like Trump or not, those who like or at least appreciate what he's doing to the establishment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that she understood why the Epstein case was such a big effing deal to Trump supporters. I think Bongino and Patel get it, but also I think they are more serious lawmen than she is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so to your point, what I hope is happening behind the scenes is I'm gonna dredge up another oldie and a goodie. One, because I think it matters, and two, this is kind of why I brought up. I don't remember a couple months ago. I brought up the Spain's own attempt at the Green New Deal decades ago and what a disaster it was. And I forgot to mention one of the reasons I brought that up is because if you're listening to me, I want you to, even if you disagree with me, know that I know what I'm talking about. That if I cite something, even if I don't have the source at hand, I'm not just making crap up. That I have been paying attention to this stuff for a long time, and I unfortunately remember it, especially if it's negative. Um, and that's what I'm doing here is, and I want to reset. So go back to when the primary was still going on, and I
2020
said
primary or
the 2024 primary,
okay.
and it didn't last very long, and so it ended up not mattering because by the time Super Tuesday rolled around and Texas got to vote, it was already over because the people who mattered had already bowed out, and it was like Nikki Haley was
Mm-hmm.
the only one who was left, and no, honey, you don't know what time it is. Go away. Um, but I had said if it is still going on and is competitive, I am voting for DeSantis. And I gave a few reasons. And a big one was, and I shared an article and I played a little bit of a DeSantis supporting super PAC put together what I thought was one of the best anti-Trump um, campaign commercials I had ever seen from the left or the right, which was a cut of all the many times during the 2015 and 2016 campaign he was egging on the crowd of lock her up.
Mm.
And then right after the election was saying, yeah, that plays good in the election, but now we have to govern and we're moving on, basically. And I made the point that, sir, you are in the situation you are in because you didn't lock her up.
Mm-hmm.
Because her crimes were so egregious and so obvious that by not doing anything about it, you let the entire political establishment, left and right, know I'm not serious. My anti established rhetoric only goes so far, and you're safe. And so if you feel threatened, you can come at me, which they did.
Mm-hmm.
That I made the point that the lawfare that he was undergoing in New York and DC and even Georgia was a direct result of him not appointing a special counsel that could be broadly trusted, and going after Hillary Clinton. And I want to reset that for those of you who have lives and aren't political dorks like me with a quick list here of, as this author, Rusty Weiss, who is a political pundit and blogger, and this is from July of 2016. And as he put it, here's a brief rundown that anybody can do with a Google search in which 10 people were actually punished for similar or lesser offenses than what Mrs. Clinton got away with yesterday. And he lists Bill Clinton's national security advisor, State Department official, Bill Clinton's own CIA director who had to be pardoned while he was working out a plea negotiation. Um, this is the biggie to me, which is a Navy engineer sentenced for mishandling classified material. Brian Nishimura of Folsom, California, pled guilty to the unauthorized removal and retention of classified materials during stints in Afghanistan in 2007 and 2008. Here's the money quote from the AP, quote, an FBI search of Nishimura's home turned up classified materials, but did not reveal evidence he intended to distribute them, end quote. The exact words used to clear Hillary of her misdeeds. Instead, Nishimura was sentenced to 2 years probation, fined $7,500, and had to surrender his security clearance. Meanwhile, Clinton will be able to serve as commander-in-chief. And there are a bunch of these. Sailor who smuggled classified ships off a document, classified documents off a ship. Yes, thank you, brain. This is the biggie to me. This one really stands out to me because, again, the intention doesn't matter when it comes to the law of classified material because of how serious leaking this stuff can be. Officer First Class Christian Saucier allegedly used a cell phone camera to take photos in the classified engine room of the nuclear submarine where he worked as a mechanic. The USS Alexandria then destroyed a laptop camera and memory card after learning he was under investigation. He was indicted on one felony count of unlawful retention of national defense information and another felony count of obstruction of justice. So I remember that one specifically more because it was so seemingly harmless. He took a picture of where he worked to send to his kids. But you could clearly see classified stuff in that engine room because it's a freaking nuclear submarine. And then he got in bigger trouble because he tried to cover it all up. Like Mrs. Clinton, who finally turned over her server after it had been wiped. You can go deeper. The Observer, which is more right-leaning, The Countless Crimes of Hillary Clinton. This is from August of 2015 by Sidney Powell. And then you have The Atlantic. And yes, the guy who wrote this is a right-leaning guy. He worked at the Heritage Foundation, but The Atlantic is not a right-leaning publication, and they actually published his article. And again, it's behind the paywall, but you get the point from the headline, From Whitewater to Benghazi, a Clinton Scandal Primer. In a letter on Sunday, FBI Director James Comey wrote that newly discovered emails did not change the FBI's prior conclusion that Hillary Clinton should not be charged with the crime. Not that she didn't commit a crime, but that she should not be charged.
Well, as he's covering his own ass after his 86-47 thing.
So,
yeah.
The point being, even if it's too late for Clinton, the Clintons, because a lot of Doge stuff and Data Republican in particular uncovered a lot of connections to the Clinton Foundation with all this shady money, circular money. Even if it's too late there, okay, fine. You need to pick someone, pick a target, and it needs to be someone big.
It's not too late because she's talking about running in 2028.
This is true. So if you want, you can still go after her, but specifically when it comes to the things that happened under the Biden administration, you need to pick a target and it needs to be someone big. Okay? There have been a lot
Well,
of
as I talked about
good.
earlier, it needs to be a layer of targets. It needs to be that top layer of targets and amnesty everybody underneath so that they actually come out
Hmm.
unafraid. Because if you pick one target, then nobody underneath is going to come to your aid because they're going to be afraid of the other people that should have been targets,
Mm,
especially if you picked the wrong target. So you're talking about Hillary. Maybe it's Obama, or maybe it's Hunter, or maybe it's somebody we don't even know. It's Manchin. Maybe Manchin is just hiding in plain sight, right?
hmm,
If you pick the wrong target, then nobody will help you because they know where the power lies.
hmm,
So you have to have a layer of targets that says anything above this is it is who we're going after. Anybody below it, you are free to go if you help us. Safety in numbers, you're a school of fish. Okay, let's take care of the sharks.
that's a better point, and it is definitely valid because
And the
to
great thing is, for your side, there's going to be Republicans in there too.
as there should be. This
Yeah,
is
there should be.
this is
Yeah,
a bi this is and should be a bipartisan effort.
it's an establishment issue. It's not a
Hmm.
Democrat or a Republican issue. So, yeah.
This is why, as much as I don't like him because he just comes off as a plastic sleazy politician, I wish they would have stood firm on Matt Gaetz as Attorney General,
Mm,
like they did with Hegseth and Secretary of Defense, because I think he would actually push to get things done, whereas I think Bondi is more concerned about optics.
hmm. Yeah, I agree with you there.
And so and this would be my other point too. So another thing that's making the rounds, especially in righty circles, and I don't know if anti-establishment lefty people are doing the same, is people criticizing Patel and Bongino because a big talking point during the election, during the whole administration, but especially during the election, is the and Bongino himself said this at times when I listened to a show, is that the FBI is irredeemably corrupt and should just be shut down.
Hmm.
So why aren't you just shutting it down? In much the same way that Linda McMahon, as Secretary of Education, is saying, "I want to be the last Secretary of Education,"
Hmm. And she's doing a job too.
and she's
Yeah.
working on shutting down
Yeah.
that entire department.
Okay, so
What?
let me throw this out there with the Gates thing. What if Gates was sacrificed to get all those other people in?
Yeah,
It was okay, so we'll not go through with Gates and we'll make Gates the one to bow out. If you get RFK through, if you get Patel through, if you get all of these people, you can make it a kind of a cinema. You can make it a movie, but at the same time, they're going to all get through and Gates will bow because I think they were more afraid of Gates than everyone else.
could be, could be. Um, I just hope that,
Again, for good or bad, he's the art of making the deal. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I well, to that point. So there's so much focus on the big beautiful bill that I'm hoping they don't lose focus on one of the reasons you're not going to get your big beautiful bill through is because there is no fear in the establishment.
Mhm.
Um, was it Jefferson who said? I think it was Jefferson who said, "When the government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny."
I do believe you're right. That sounds like a Jefferson quote.
And right now, we are in tyranny because the people fear the government,
Hmm.
and the government have absolutely no fear of the people they are quote unquote serving. And that is, I understand from an art of the deal point of view of why Trump is putting so much energy and political capital into this big, beautiful bill. But on the other hand, I hope they're not losing focus. And I don't know who's in charge of this, of the law side of it, to
Mhm.
actually use law to seek justice rather than lawfare to punish your opponents. Of no, we had some big effing crimes happen here and we need to investigate these things.
Yeah,
Or even
well,
if they aren't crimes, they were such massive ethical breaches that we need an official investigation so that we can tell the public, here is what happened and here is who did it.
let's circle it back to the Sosnick quote about the media trial. This is part of this actually relates very well to it because if he was to go after the people who did the bad things, it has already been set up from a media standpoint to be going after your political enemies. It is automatically
Mm,
going to be thrust into the realm of the Putin and the Hitler, or name your historical figure that does this, right? It's already been framed. The media has controlled that already. So there is going to be a certain percentage of the country, and it might be around 50%, even though the Democratic Party is only about 35-40% of the country, that is going to automatically think, because of the framing, that he is just going after political enemies,
mhm.
not after justice. And that's where Adam was so correct, is we have created an environment where the media is the trial, the judge, jury, and executioner of whatever happens. And it's been framed that way. So he has to navigate that water, which those of us that want justice want it to happen. But if Hillary gets indicted with something, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how true it is. It matters what people think about it.
That's a good point. And it's an especially good point because that was certainly verifiably true during the last election, and yet Trump was able to bypass that.
Hmm.
There are mechanisms, long form podcast interviews where you can sit down, whether it's him with someone like Theo Vaughn again, or whether it's Bongino sitting down with Rogan,
Hmm.
laying out the case, saying, "All right, here are the people that we are indicting, and here's why."
Hmm.
And you've got 2.5 to 3.5 hours to make your case, and tens of millions of people, if not hundreds, are going to watch that.
Hmm.
And you just hope that that is enough to break through the corporate media narrative that is going to be spinning like wild on the other side.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is where I would love the Supreme Court to come in, because this is actually their job. So when we talk freedom of speech, we have laws against slander and defamation. And if there is a direct lie that defamates or slanders somebody by the media, that should be enforced. But we also jump on the freedom of speech wagon, which I think we should have as a media. So we need a clear line to be laid out of what is what. Uh, because if we're going to live in a free society, we need to know where those boundaries are, lest we err on the side of tyranny, basically. Mm.
The problem with hoping that the Supreme Court does anything is that they are a part of, if not one of the worst parts of the problem, because
Mm.
they are every bit as establishment is the legislatures and the corporate media people and the lobbyists and all these other people that we decry. And what I was just pulling up is do you remember the Maine state representative who was censured by the Maine state house for a social media post she made about a trans athlete who placed first in the girls pole vault event? Did you hear about this at all?
No, I did not. I know Maine had a issue with the federal funding because they refused to back down,
Yep.
but
Yep.
yeah.
All right. Well, while this debate is going on, there is a uh, representative in the state house who was censured by her colleagues, and this censure meant that she could not participate in debates or vote until she returned to good standing in the House. That and what was good standing, and this is a heavily Democratic House, and she is a Republican. They demanded that she remove the social media post and apologize.
So a struggle session, basically. Yeah.
All right. And a lot of people were touting the fact that the Supreme Court, in one of its recent rulings, slapped down the Maine legislature and said, no, you can't do this. This is a blatant violation of the First Amendment. Luckily, a lot of people on X with platforms were saying what I was saying, which is, hold on a second. This isn't a good thing because the vote was 7-2. Sotomayor and Jackson both dissented
Hmm.
and said, no, a
I'm sorry,
state legislature
Sotomayor
can
is
do
the
this.
worst.
It's, I mean, flip a coin for me between those
Yeah.
two. But the point being, that
Jackson
should have
actually
been an
seems
obvious
intelligent.
9-0.
Sotomayor doesn't.
Yeah, whether you agree with the stance or not. I mean, for crying out loud, this would be like, all right, turn it on its head and have some the one of the reddest states in the union, Oklahoma, its state house censures someone who's an LGBTQ plus advocate and won't let them vote or debate on the floor until they renounce their views on gay marriage. What would the Supreme Court do? They would smack that down in 2 seconds and it would be 9-0.
Hmm.
So don't look to the court. The court's part of the problem, a major part of the
Well,
problem.
but I'm talking about the court from the spirit of what they're supposed to stand for.
Yes.
So we have laws on the book created by Congress. The court is supposed to clarify that and help it wait, yeah, clarify it because the executive enforces it, right? So if we have a question, they should clarify that. So we already have laws on the books for defamation and slander. Why can't we have a clarification from the courts to say, you know what? Media should have freedom of speech unless you break the law. And here's what the law says.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's actually their job. That's why I say the Supreme Court, because that's what they do. And at the highest level, when we're talking about a national media, they should be clarifying that for us. And we should have dissenting opinions and pro opinions and everything to actually look at and set precedents because yeah, slander should be enforced because reputational damage is, as we've talked about in our social episodes, leads to the hardest word to say ever, ostracization of an individual, which is death. When you lose your status in society, you are on your way to death. Okay. That's why they exiled people instead of killing them in the past, right? Because it was almost worse than death to be exiled. And you can slander somebody or defame them to the point that their status is so horrible that they want to kill themselves or they're living in hell basically. It That's what the media does a lot, especially the very biased media that you brought up during the Time article and during the Clinton article and stuff. So yeah, we already have laws in the book, just like we talk about with gun laws and stuff like that. We already have laws in the book. Just enforce them. Don't create anything new, and let's see what happens. That's my stance.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that is what is happening behind the scenes because to your point, people at the top, not just persons, but a good chunk of people at the highest level need to be held responsible for what happened the past 4 years
Hmm.
that almost certainly violated law. And again, even if it didn't, there needs to be an investigation to let the American people know no laws were violated here, but it was unethical as hell. Here's what happened, and
Hmm.
then make the rounds and make your case and try and push through the corporate media counter narrative. Because right now it is not looking good, I feel, for the pro justice side, in much the same way that the Maha side of MAGA is starting to get really disillusioned here with some stuff that is happening
I've
or isn't happening.
No, they've made good. See, this, I don't understand that. People are so impatient.
Yeah.
Kennedy and uh Bhattacharya and Prasad and McCarty are doing some really, we're 200 days into this, man.
Yes.
They're actually doing really good work. And I'm glad Prasad is a part of the group now too. I have his book right there on cancer. So as we were talking about today, and how we've been just shit on how we handled this. And it's just give these guys a second.
Mhm.
First of all, not a single one of them was a government establishment person. So they're learning that part too.
Yeah.
And now and then there are good things already happening. The Maha side has actually been the best part of it so far. We talk about Bondi and Cash and everything. I think they got roadblocks that the Maha side does not have.
Mhm.
But yeah, no. With McCarty as our FDA director, and yeah, we're in good hands right now with that, and we're gonna be a healthier nation. It's gonna take years. You don't get healthy in a day. But yeah, at least this generation of children that is being born now is going to be healthier than the last five. And that to me is, I don't know why anybody's complaining right now on that part.
Well, hey, we stumbled into some optimism that we can end on.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
no. That part, the people involved with that and how they're going about it is as good as you can possibly get because things can only happen so fast. So,
yeah. All right. Well, we will see y'all next time. I don't know when that'll be because I'm about to be doing some traveling, and so I don't know when we'll get to and what we'll get to. But
well, we had a comment from a frequent commenter that's very long, and we will address that. We needed I think we needed a little moment to think about
mhm.
it.
it,
Uh,
it made me go and as I was mulling it over, I actually think it will go into what I'd originally wanted to talk about today, which was ethics and morality and how how you create a system and then how that affects the society that does or does not follow that system.
mhm.
Um, so I actually think my thoughts on your comment there, uh, new ideals, since you had to make a new account. Uh, I think my thoughts on your comment are going to be kind of unwound in my thoughts on ethics and morality in general.
Yeah, so your homework is to watch the Ari Mati interview with Trigonometry. He's a comedian, Estonian comedian, and he talks about actually what ISO talked about a little bit, and how people from his country think of that whole situation. And again, Estonia, formerly part of the Soviet Union, and I think there might be a cultural thing here, which is actually cool. I love learning about different cultures in real
Hmm.
time. And that's one of my favorite parts of you, Isomorphic, is that you give us a perspective from a different lifestyle, really, a different place in the world and what you have to deal with. And I appreciate that you're trying to keep it safe for us to keep our channel going. So we do appreciate that. And, there is a little bit of that in our commentary, which might be frustrating to you, but we have to live in the YouTube world to some degree. Maybe we'll transfer to Rumble. I don't know at some point. Maybe, I should be actually simultaneously posting them,
Hmm.
uh, but yeah, we have a lot to think about from your comment because it was a long comment and it had a lot of deep stuff in it. So we will do that and we will address it. Don't worry. And I'm actually going to leave this as a comment on your comment. So just in case you didn't listen to this
Mhm.
video, uh, what are we doing? Are we doing Wheel of Time?
Actually, I
Or
think
are we taking a
uh,
break?
I think I will have time to record this weekend, and I think that can be our prologue before we go into Dostoevsky is to talk about what I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use Heinlein and Starship Troopers again and go a little deeper into moral philosophy, and so we can kind of create a foundation before we go into the specifics using
Yeah, and
Dostoevsky.
in that time, I know who has it. I'm going to try to get my copy of Moral Landscape back because I actually want to go through it and read my notes from the first time I read it.
Mhm.
So it again, it upsets me that he went this direction, but it
Yeah.
was one of the better books ever written. So uh yeah, we'll do that. I dropped the ball and I didn't post our Robin episode. I will post it while this one is rendering. So you'll probably have two back to back, pretty at least within a day of each other. And yeah, leave in the comments things you want us to talk about. If you like, it could be anything. Fitness related, it could be nutrition related, it could be politics related. We want to keep the content going. So just be interactive, people.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, later.